It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. More than 50 UK nationals are on board a plane that crashed in one of India's worst ever aviation disasters. But one British man miraculously survived. Vishwas Kumar Ramesh somehow escaped the wreckage as an Air India flight from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick crashed just moments after it took off. So far, more than 200 bodies have been recovered, with many more fatalities expected, making it one of the deadliest commercial crashes of the past 2 decades. As details of the British victims start to emerge, communities are coming together across the country, with the King expressing his deepest possible sympathies. Details of why the Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashed so close to takeoff are still unknown, but it's another dark chapter in the recent history of the beleaguered plane maker. Good evening. We start tonight with what looks like being one of the worst aviation disasters of the past 20 years. Shortly after 6 o'clock this evening, Air India Flight 171 from Ahmedabad was due to land at London Gatwick. It never arrived. With 242 people on board, including 53 Britons, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner had only just taken off when it lost height and crashed just moments later. Initially, it was understood that everybody on board had died, but by some miracle, a British man from Leicester managed to walk away from the wreckage. Sky News has spoken to his family, whose joy at his survival is mixed with pain. His brother was also on the plane, presumed to be amongst the victims. We'll hear from them shortly. But first, our international correspondent Alex Rossi has this report and a warning. It does contain footage of the crash that you might find distressing.
It was clear almost immediately that the Air India flight was in serious trouble. Less than a minute after takeoff, the aircraft began losing altitude before a massive explosion filled the sky. This CCTV footage shows what happened from another angle. The aeroplane fails to gain height, flying low and flat before the moment of impact. A mayday call had been made just before it came down. Fully loaded with fuel, the Boeing Dreamliner crashed into a residential area at 1:38 p.m. local time. The flight was bound for London's Gatwick airport. Thick black smoke filled the sky, rising above rooftops. 242 people were on board. That number includes 53 British nationals. Miraculously, there are survivors. This is Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who's British. He can be seen moments after the crash, walking away dazed, but relatively unscathed. In the video, he tells people around him that he came off the plane. He was travelling with his brother, whose fate is unknown. At the family's home in Leicester, they're still trying to understand what happened.
Even though we survived, yeah, it's a miracle. Like, still worried about our other brother, my other brother.
The airline has set up an emergency helpline for the relatives of those on board. At number 10, the Prime Minister paid tribute to the victims.
There will be British and Indian families across the land who are absolutely impacted by this, and our thoughts, first and foremost, are with them. Obviously, the investigation is going on. We've dispatched an investigation team that's been deployed. The Foreign Secretary is leading on this, and we'll obviously update as soon as we can. But we're working with the Indian authorities on this to establish the facts.
The scale of the tragedy has been compounded by its location, right in the heart of a built-up neighbourhood. Debris is scattered everywhere, with parts of the aircraft lodged in buildings. Photographs taken from inside housing used by medical workers show part of the plane's landing gear. In a dining room nearby, plates are still on tables, evidence that residents were eating when the aircraft tore through. Emergency crews are continuing to arrive at the scene as teams search for any signs of life and begin the grim task of recovering bodies.
We are actively working with the authorities on all emergency response efforts. A special team of caregivers from Air India is on their way to Ahmedabad to provide additional support. Investigations will take time, but anything we can do now, we are doing.
This has now become a coordinated response involving multiple agencies on the ground. At nearby hospitals, the scene is frantic. Casualties are being rushed in for treatment, many with severe injuries.
The process of retrieving all the dead bodies is almost complete. DNA profiling of the family members of the victims will also be completed very soon. Those victims whose families are abroad, information has been sent to them, and as soon as they reach them, their DNA samples will be collected. And the process of collecting DNA samples of the dead will also have been completed.
The cause of the crash at this stage remains unknown. Aviation investigators are now beginning the long and complex process of determining what went wrong in what is already being called one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Now, after initial police reports suggested everybody on board Air India Flight 171 had been killed, we now know there was at least one survivor. And while more than 200 bodies have been recovered, it's still unclear just how many casualties and fatalities there were on the ground as well. Our India correspondent Neville Lazarus has the latest now from Ahmedabad.
It is absolutely devastating. Just beside me is a wing of the plane. It's charred. You know, it's sort of charred at the back. It's been separated from the rest of the body. Behind me, it's almost about 100 meters behind me, that building, I don't know if you can see it, the buildings behind me where this plane crashed into, and everything of that building is charred. The facade, it's damaged, it's all charred black and strewn all around this area for you know, at least 50 meters further to my right and about another 50 meters towards my left, where you can see these charred remains of this plane. Now, this plane took off around 1:38 in the afternoon, and within minutes it crashed into the earth, erupting into this fireball. It's just evident out here to kind of see the devastation that has taken place. It is shocking in sort of terms of, though it is nightfall, we can still feel, and some parts of the plane is still smouldering further down the road onto my right. But looking at this, it is quite incredible how someone could survive this, but absolutely shocking for the rest of this country and heartbreaking, as Prime Minister Modi had mentioned earlier on, and how sad the whole country is.
That's our India correspondent Neville Lazarus. Well, the flight was due to land at Gatwick around a couple of hours ago now, and Sky's Molly Malone is there for us this evening. Evening to you, Molly. What has been the response there? Because they've set up facilities in case people had turned up expecting to be welcoming relatives off a flight, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right. As you say, Matt, this should have been a flight that 2 hours ago was landing here at Gatwick Airport. People would have been perhaps greeting family and friends and making their onward journey. Instead, the situation tonight is so tragically different. We know that 242 people were on board that flight, and that includes 53 British nationals and 169 Indian nationals. I've been here at Gatwick Airport throughout the course of the day. We know that they've set up a reception centre looking to provide assistance, looking to provide support to the hundreds of family members with loved ones on board that flight. We expect that some people throughout today, into tomorrow and throughout the coming days, will be coming here to the airport to speak directly to staff. Others will be continuing to use that emergency hotline that's been set up by the Foreign Office. This was supposed to be a routine flight. They run a number of them, Air India, each week between Ahmedabad and Gatwick Airport. It's around a 10-hour flight that should have landed just before 6:30 here this evening. Instead, we have a situation where the High Commissioner for the UK is heading out to India, as are 4 members of the UK's air accident investigation team. The Prime Minister, as we know, is being kept updated. He's called the situation devastating and has convened COBRA, which is fairly typical when you're coordinating agencies and authorities both here and internationally. We've also heard, as you might expect from Buckingham Palace, the King has been kept updated. He's extended his deepest sympathy to all those involved. Matt, we've had a number of people throughout the course of the day here coming up to us, the world's media gathering here at Gatwick Airport, asking what's happening, what's going on, and I expect it's those very questions that families will be asking tonight as they desperately await answers.
Yes, no doubt, Molly. Thank you very much indeed. Well, most of the families who are hoping and waiting for loved ones to arrive at Gatwick tonight will be in a state of anguish this evening, as Molly said there. For one of those families, though, there was the incredible news that somebody had survived. Vishwas Kumar Ramesh is, so far, the only confirmed survivor of the crash and was able to speak to his family in Leicester once he'd been taken to hospital. He doesn't know the fate, though, of his brother, who was also on the same plane. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, has more now.
It just doesn't seem possible. The man in the white T-shirt, a passenger from seat 11A, walking from the wreckage with barely a limp. British man Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, survivor but confused and distraught that his brother is missing. His family in Leicester spoke to him in hospital and just before takeoff.
When he was on the runway, well, my dad called him and Vishwas said, "Oh, we're going to take off soon." And then literally like 2 minutes later, he video called my dad. As he crashed, he said, "Oh, our plane's crashed." All of that. I don't know where my brother is. I don't see any other passengers. I don't know how I'm alive, how I exited the plane.
I can hear your voice shaking. I know this is a silly question, but how are you and your family keeping up at the moment?
I mean, you can see the state of my mum. Like, we're all just, I've got no words to describe it.
In the family home, friends gathered to offer support. One extraordinary story must have given faint hope to the families of the other 52 British nationals on board. Some in Leicester trying to get information from the local travel agent.
For those family, relatives and friends whose they are affected, it is a real sad and very difficult moment for them, because obviously our community, especially Asian community, has a well network and well they're in connection with their relatives, their friends, so they are very close with them and they have a bigger impact in their lives.
In a statement, the King said, "My wife and I have been desperately shocked by the terrible event in Ahmedabad this morning. Our special prayers and deepest possible sympathy are with the family and friends of all those affected by this appallingly tragic incident across so many nations as they await the news of their loved ones." At the time of these prayers in Neasden Temple in London, Air India Flight 171 should have just touched down in Gatwick. Its passengers arriving on British soil, 53 of them coming home.
All our mandirs, temples here in the UK have been offering prayers. We will also offer prayers here before the Aarti ceremony. We will offer prayers for the unfortunate people who have passed away, the passengers, the crew, the pilots, also for all their family members, that they may find strength and courage at this very difficult and challenging time.
This is one of many communities across the UK still coming to terms with what's happened. The worst aviation disaster for British citizens since 9/11. Here, one brother survived, another is probably lost.
I was meant to pick them up. We were going to have a party on the weekends, family gathering.
For so many families, everything has changed, forever, in an instant. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, it's sad to say that many communities, many people across the country will be affected by what looks like being the biggest loss of life for British citizens in a plane crash for 40 years. Joining me now from Manchester is Vimal Choksi, Labour councillor for Ashton Waterloo. Vimal, good to see you. When you heard about the plane crash, what was your reaction?
Firstly, Matt, thank you. And if I may express my sincere sympathy and solidarity with all those that are affected by this tragic incident. Obviously, a lot of things went through my mind. I've been to Ahmedabad very recently. I'm familiar with the location. And there are lots of people, lots of friends who have known a certain number of people who were on those flights. So it's certainly very terrifying and devastating news personally to me and to the community.
Which certainly reminds people, Vimal, doesn't it, of the connection between the UK and India, particularly the UK and Gujarat.
Yeah, India and Gujarat, Gujarat in particular, has a strong linkages with the, nearly 50% diaspora of the Indian diaspora in the UK has links with the Gujarat. And there are regular, I've heard a number of stories where a lot of family members did travel to celebrate the Eid in southern part of the Gujarat. As well as some parents were traveling to London to see their family and kids because of summer holidays. So, there is a strong sense of connections, 3 flights in a week. So, and there are, serious, significant community presence of Gujarati descent in London, Leicester, and many parts of the UK.
And of course, the Indian cricket team are over here as well. They're about to play, so you'd imagine a few people may have been travelling for those reasons too. Look, lots of connections, lots of links. Vimal, just to come back to that point of hearing something like this happened, knowing it's in Ahmedabad, you may, like I know you do, have wider family there as well. It must be terrifying for people thinking they may know someone involved or someone who could have been on that flight.
Absolutely. A lot of things goes through your mind, and it's tragic scenes that everybody has seen, gruesome scenes on the television screen, as well as on the social media. It's going to leave long-lasting impact on the families who are involved with this tragic incident. And I'm hoping that, both government will offer necessary support to those families. Those are affected by this incident, as well as providing some questions and information that family direly need in this situation.
What do you make of this remarkable, almost miraculous story of this man from Leicester, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who seemed to have survived, walked away, it seems relatively unscathed, cuts and bruises, yes, he's been fairly beaten up by the experience, but somehow has managed to be what we think is the only survivor. What did you make of that?
Yeah, it's absolutely, great to see the sole survivor who's managed to come alive, through this tragic incident. It's very difficult to explain the circumstances. He must have chosen to jump off the plane or, while he was sitting next to the exit. So, it's all I guess it's all down to his presence of mind and ability to take some risk.
Vimal, when things like this happen to a certain community, whatever that community is, they tend to get in touch. WhatsApp groups will be buzzing and that kind of thing. Have you had experience of that today, the sort of wider British Asian, British Indian community getting in touch, offering support, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I've had a number of messages and a number of calls from wider section of society offering their solidarity and support and asking me question if your family has been affected or your friends have been affected. So there has been a lot of love and affection and support from all sections of society. And I think, I want, through your channel, I want to express my strong solidarity and support to all those who are affected in this situation. And we want to extend our sincere support and solidarity and wanting to provide that necessary support to tackle the long-lasting impact of this tragic incident in their lives.
Appreciated, Vimal. Thanks so much for joining us. That's Vimal Choksi, who's the Labour councillor from Ashton Waterloo in Greater Manchester. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, just some breaking news to bring you now. And while we were talking there, it has been confirmed by Air India that 242 people were on board the plane and all but one of them died in the crash. They say the sole survivor, who we know to be Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, is being treated in hospital. So in the past few moments, Air India has confirmed that all but one of the 242 people who were on board flight AI 171 died when it came down in Ahmedabad. So look, what else do we know about that flight and what caused it to crash just moments after it took off from Ahmedabad airport? Our correspondent Thomas Moore has been taking a closer look.
Fatal plane crashes are rare, but they do happen. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner has a stellar safety record. This is the first fatal crash. So what could have gone wrong? Well, flight AI 171 departed at 13:38 local time from Ahmedabad, a city in the Indian state of Gujarat. It was heading for London Gatwick, due to land just over 9 hours later. Actual flight data shows the aircraft leaving on time, accelerating down the runway and lifting off. But it only reached an altitude of 190 metres before crashing just beyond the airport perimeter into an accommodation block for doctors. The aircraft was the original 787-8 model of the Dreamliner, which Boeing started building in 2009. Air crash investigators will examine the 2 black boxes that record the conversations in the cockpit and also the data from the aircraft. What will they look for? Well, first off, the engines. At takeoff, they would have been working at maximum thrust. Even if there's a mechanical failure in one, the aircraft should have still been able to fly. So did the aircraft collide with a flock of birds as it lifted off, causing both engines to lose power? It's caused crashes in the past. They'll also look for evidence of pilot error. The captain and co-pilot were experienced, with more than 9,000 flying hours between them. But other crashes have been caused by pilots accidentally shutting down the one remaining working engine. Video shows that the plane doesn't drop from the sky. It looks like it's coming in to land. One experienced pilot told Sky News the flaps on the wings don't seem to be extended as they should.
I can't see any sign of takeoff flap being set. And with an aircraft of this type, you would have to have the correct flap setting for takeoff. So if for any reason that hadn't been selected or it had failed, that would perhaps be an explanation for why such a well-designed public transport aircraft should go down immediately after takeoff.
It's too early to know exactly what went wrong. Indian air safety authorities will lead on the investigation with help from the UK's Air Accident Investigation Branch. Experts from Boeing are also on standby. They'll want to quickly establish whether this is a catastrophic one-off or if there is evidence of a technical problem that could affect the 1,100 or so other Dreamliners currently in service.
Joining me now is aviation expert Anita Mendarata. Anita, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on the UK Tonight. What's your sort of instinctive reaction to what we've seen, particularly in the video that's been released of the plane taking off? What do you think happened?
I think my instinctive reaction is that today's word of devastating is absolutely to be applied. We've seen an extremely unusual situation, and I think we need to put this in context in that if we look at global aviation, every single day, almost 100,000 aircraft take to the skies. This one incident has put enormous amount of fear and concern naturally into people around the whole principle of aviation. But what we're seeing is that the uniqueness of this incident that has occurred, and we've had data media and hypothesis right through the day is not something we've ever seen. Boeing has never seen it. Air India has never seen it. Global aviation has never seen it. We know what elements we can rule out in terms of reasons for why this might have occurred, but we also know that there's a significant amount of analysis and understanding that needs to take place through the investigation. We know it wasn't an environmental issue. We know that the weather didn't have a role to play. But was it a bird strike? Was it something on the runways? Was it something with air traffic control? Was it the aircraft? Was it the pilot? It could have been a number of these elements. We as the global community need to stand back and watch and allow the investigation to identify not just information, but verified information. That is fundamentally important. Also, what's really critical, as we're focusing on what happened, we need to also focus on to whom it happened. There are a number of lives that have been lost on the aircraft. If you think of one survivor making it off the aircraft, that is miraculous. And as much as people say he walked off the aircraft and he was unhurt, he is psychologically traumatized for the rest of his life. That is incredibly important to recognize, as is all the people within Air India, any family and friends related to all the passengers and the crew on board, and the community in Ahmedabad itself. That was a high-density residential community that was struck by this tragedy. They are going to lose people. They are losing their people. And all of this needs to be taken into account. So the investigation and what happened is one thing. The humanitarian response, the compassion and the support that's required is another. And we must not lose sight of that.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Anita, in terms of setting the context on this, I mean, what's your understanding of when a plane crash happens, the proportion of the reason being human error or technical faults? We've seen, for example, with Boeing planes, not the same kind of plane, others, technical reasons, software glitches being responsible for plane crashes in recent years. Does that tend to be the case, or is it more likely to be human error?
It can be a combination. The possibility of it being a cocktail is very important, because when you look at aviation engineering, to me, it's very much engineering and art combined. It is remarkable, the ability that we have to be able to fly. But equally, it's about the capability of the pilots to be able to manage that engineering. It's a partnership between man and aircraft, ultimately, or woman and aircraft, whatever the case may be. But it's very important to recognize that whatever happened, there were so many things happening at once and so quickly. This was magnified by the fact that there was no additional runway. So once the aircraft had reached that, as they call, point of no return, where they have to depart, they needed to go for the air. Whatever was happening with the actual hardware on the aircraft, whether it was a breach of operating protocols, something technical, something with the pilot, they didn't have the space to be able to find the height that they needed, nor a safe space to land. Add on top of this the element that because it was the start of a flight, the fuel was at its maximum. So we're looking at about 130 tons of aircraft fuel, which once sparked creates the devastating explosion that we've seen, with its wide reach in terms of its impact on the ground far beyond the aircraft itself. So all of these things combined have created the ultimate worst case scenario. And that's why it's so important that we understand exactly what happened, not place blame on the aircraft manufacturer or the airline prematurely, until we understand what exactly is going on. And this is why the role of the leadership is critical, both at Air India, ultimately with Campbell Wilson, the CEO at the helm, and Kelly Ortberg at Boeing, they working together to understand as partners, aircraft and airline, what went wrong and how do we make sure this never happens again.
What do you make of their responses, but Boeing in particular, given the rough ride they've had in recent years? And you mentioned their CEO is fairly new in the role, having come out of retirement to take on that job.
It's a very important point. Kelly came out of retirement and took on effectively, but we're on the eve of his anniversary. He took office in August last year, but he knew the challenges. He knew what was happening in terms of safety, quality, and regulator intervention on the lines. He knew what was happening globally in terms of reputation with both investors and the customers. And he knew what was happening culturally. And he has owned this. He stepped up to this challenge and he's owned it. His reaching out now to the chairman of Air India, offering full support, that's what's required. If we look at the Air India side, it's very much recognizing that the CEO, Campbell, has been remarkable. He put out a video message to the world, making it very clear that he represents Air India's commitment to everyone to understand what happened, make sure this never happens again, but also make sure that we stop and respect the grieving that is taking place by all those that are being impacted, whether it was in the air, on the ground, with the airline. This is a global aviation issue because it hits all of us at a visceral level, because of the fear that it generates, the same way that aviation inspires so much awe and inspiration. All of us are impacted, and that's why at a global level, we all need to support this investigation and the leadership behind it.
Anita Mendarata, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Well, Sky News has spoken to the family of the UK national who survived the plane crash. Shamal Freeman Powell spoke to Vishwas Kumar Ramesh's brother at their family home in Leicester.
When he was on the runway, well, my dad called him and Vishwas said, oh, we're going to take off soon. And then literally like 2 minutes later, he video called my dad. As he crashed, he said, oh, our plane's crashed, all of that. I don't know where my brother is, I don't see any other passengers. I don't know how I'm alive, how I exited the plane.
I can hear you're both shaking. I know this is a silly question, but how are you and your family keeping up at the moment?
I mean, you can see the state of my mum. Like, we're all just, I've got no words to describe it.
And many would say it was a miracle that Vivash was able to get out of that plane, but you're still waiting on news, aren't you, for your other brother?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's a miracle he survived. What about the other miracle for my other brother?
Now I see your community has come out to support you. I know that's super important, but how much information have you had from authorities? What has that been like?
Literally from the authorities, from the no information whatsoever, no updates, no nothing.
And I was speaking to another relative.
They've only published that he's the only remaining survivor. First they published that, oh, all the passengers on board have died. Then they said, oh, there's one survivor. What do we believe?
And that's why we came, because we heard those reports and we wanted to confirm it. But I imagine it must have been scary listening and hearing that. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, like you said, scary and everything. Like, just hearing about this crash. Like, I'm scared to fly now. Just to even stay on a plane now.
And what were your plans meant to be for today? I know that you were speaking about meant to be going to the airport, is that right? Tell me
yeah, that's right. Like, I was meant to pick them up. We were going to have a party on the weekends, family gathering.
It's not just in Leicester where the pain of this tragedy is being felt. Joining me this evening is Poonam Pranjpe, who is from the Bournemouth Pool and Christchurch Indian Community Association. Poonam, thanks for joining us. Your reaction to what happened today?
Absolutely in shock, utter sadness. I was at work. I had no idea. My colleagues were the one who informed me. And obviously you instantly feel something personal has been lost. I came home, had a whole update of what's happened, and the WhatsApp groups were going crazy because we've got a huge community here in Bournemouth, and we were so concerned. We were just trying our best, not to speculate things and just stick together. But it's just utter shock. Our prayers and thoughts are with the families.
I don't want you to speculate either, but as we've been hearing on the show already, a lot of people in the UK with connections to Ahmedabad, connections to Gujarat, across your WhatsApp groups, which, like any people's WhatsApp groups, will be wide-ranging and you'll know people who know people. Have you been hearing of people who thought they might know someone on the flight or might have relatives who are there or planning to fly back, that kind of thing?
I think it's too early right now because it's just literally happened today. But we have heard of one lady who is a member of the Union of Malayali Association, and she hails from Kerala. She was on that flight as well and sadly has passed away. She lives in Hampshire, Portsmouth. So that's all we know. But I think as it's still very new, we'll come to know more news.
But this is a kind of flight that plenty of people you know in the British Indian community would have been taking all the time, going back to see family members or family members coming over here to the UK. Is that why it hits home so much?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a lot of Gujaratis. So Gujaratis is from Gujarat, that's the place. And Ahmedabad is their only international airport. And we have a lot of people that travel, especially just before the festivities. So we have a lot of Indian festivals that start from September. So people do make travel plans to do their shoppings, weddings. So this is quite a crucial time for a lot of people to travel.
Yeah. And those groups you're in, are people offering support, offering, an ear to talk to, that kind of thing?
We are making sure that if anybody wants to talk confidentiality, anyone who's stressed out wants to speak, we have a lovely BPC healthcare group. We have a lot of psychologists there, lots of psychiatrists there. So there's always somebody to, you can talk to if you want to help out with. That's it, yeah.
I need to ask you a similar question to what I've asked our other guests this evening, your reaction to the fact, and I'm afraid it's been confirmed that out of the 242 people on board the flight, all but one of them died. But remarkable, miraculous even, that that man from Leicester, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, managed to survive. What do you think about that?
I think he's absolutely blessed. It's just a miracle, to survive out of that. He literally jumped just before the crash, I've heard. Again, it's a story. I don't know what the reality is, but it is surely a miracle. It is surely a miracle. And I can just imagine how the family must be feeling, knowing that he's there, he's alive, but obviously he'll be traumatized for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean, Poonam, I'm not sure we know the exact details of how he managed to get out of that plane, but it seems that he was sat in seat 11A, had his boarding pass with him, and is now in hospital in Ahmedabad being looked after. But yeah, remarkable survival. People will still want to make those flights, won't they? They'll still want to go back to see relatives, maybe go back home, come the other way as well, of course. Do you think people are going to feel a bit more nervous about that now? They're going to be a bit uneasy about that?
Definitely. We're going to be super, super anxious now when we are flying. It's going to be really a tough journey. It used to be a tough journey before, knowing that we are leaving our parents, either that's from India or for going from London. But now it's going to have a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and it's just going to be stressful.
Poonam, appreciate you joining us this evening. From Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch Indian Community Association. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, earlier this evening, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, gave his reaction to the crash.
Well, the images and news from India is absolutely devastating, and I speak for the entire country in saying our thoughts are with each and every one of those involved. There will be British and Indian families across the land who are absolutely impacted by this, and our thoughts, first and foremost, are with them. Obviously, the investigation is going on. We've dispatched an investigation team that's been deployed. The Foreign Secretary is leading on this, and we'll obviously update as soon as we can. But we're working with the Indian authorities on this to establish the facts. I would say to all families, friends of anybody affected to please contact the Foreign Office for further information.
Are you in contact at all with any affected families, and do you know anything more about this possible British survivor? And if I may, is there going to any plans for a Cobra?
Well, in relation to the question of a survivor, obviously we're establishing the facts and the investigation is ongoing. We're in constant contact with the Indian authorities. We've dispatched our own team that's been acknowledged to work with them. I think it is important for all friends and family to contact the Foreign Office so we can roll out this as quickly as possible. But it is an ongoing investigation. It'll take some time. But, our hearts and our thoughts are absolutely with the friends and families of all those affected who are going to be absolutely devastated by this awful news.
The Prime Minister's reaction there. Well, earlier I spoke to former pilot Emma Henderson, and I asked first about the features of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which experts considered to be a very safe aircraft.
It's obviously a terrible day for aviation today, but as you say, Dreamliner has been an incredibly safe aircraft. It's the workhorse of the kind of longer haul fleet, and you know, something like this is obviously a devastating day for everybody.
What's the routine when it comes to takeoff? There's been a lot of discussion about how much planes can do on their own. You have a pilot and a co-pilot. Just talk us through, especially those of us uninitiated in this, the sort of usual routine of taking off in a plane like this. Yeah, sure. So aircraft can't take off on their own at the moment. Passenger aircraft don't take off on their own at the moment. There are usually two pilots sitting in the flight deck, and one will be the captain and one will be a first officer. The captain will usually be more experienced than the first officer, which is the case in this accident. And one of the pilots will be flying the aircraft and the other will be monitoring the takeoff and making calls and carrying out actions. So on the takeoff roll, once you reach the speed at which you rotate, which is the bit where you raise the nose and get the front wheel, the nose wheel off the runway, that's the rotate speed. Once the aircraft moves from being on the ground to in the air, you're looking for what's called positive climb. So you are positively climbing away from the ground. And that's where the monitoring pilot would make the call, positive climb. And that is the cue for the flying pilot to just pull back on the controls enough to raise the nose enough, but they will also then make the call to get the gear up, that the landing gear. So that's the wheels that the aircraft sits on. They're called the landing gear. So you want to get those up into the undercarriage of the aircraft and clean up the aircraft to make sure there's as little drag as possible. So that would be the normal thing you would expect when you're flying, when anybody's flying anywhere. The first thing you will hear on takeoff is a noise, and that noise is the landing gear going up into the undercarriage. This aircraft had its wheels down, and we saw that in the video. So for some reason that we don't know yet, that didn't happen on takeoff. Let me just scrutinise a little bit more about that routine. Is it the same words every time said by the senior pilot to the more junior one? It's a script, effectively, is it?
It's a script. It's not said by the more senior pilot to the junior one. It's the pilot flying to the monitoring pilot. So you will switch. So one pilot will fly one leg of a flight, the other pilot will fly the other leg of the flight, and whoever's not doing the flying, and that can be the captain or the first officer, but both pilots are equally qualified on the aircraft type. It's just they might not have as much one might not have as much experience as the other. So it's the pilot who's actually doing the flying of the aircraft. The other pilot is monitoring the radio, doing the radio calls, monitoring speeds, monitoring systems, and making calls like rotate, which is the call that gets you to pull back on the controls to raise the nose of the aircraft in the first place, get the takeoff going, and the next call you would expect to hear is the positive climb call. And you can see in the footage there that it climbs, the gear doesn't go up, and it immediately starts to sink.
Is there anything else, Emma, that strikes you from the footage?
The only other thing that I can see from the footage is that in every other way, the aircraft, from what we can see, looks normal. It doesn't look like it's on fire. It doesn't look like there's any kind of what we call yaw, which is the twisting motion that might indicate an engine problem. Whether or not that's angles, I don't know, but that will be the sorts of things that the investigators will be looking at. You know, what was the flap position on the wings? Why was the gear down? What was happening to the end? You know, was there a problem with the engines that we don't know about?
Yes.
That's the sorts of things they'll be looking at.
Well, Tata Sons is the owner of Air India and says it will offer around £86,000 to the families of each person who died in the plane crash. This afternoon, the chief executive of Air India gave this statement.
I want to brief you on a serious incident that involved an Air India aircraft a short while ago. But first, and most importantly, I would like to express our deep sorrow about this event. This is a difficult day for all of us at Air India. and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, their families, and loved ones. I know that there are many questions, and at this stage, I will not be able to answer all of them, but I do want to share the information we have at this time. Air India flight AI-171 operated with a Boeing 787-8 aircraft traveling from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick has been involved in an accident after takeoff. Flight AI-171 was carrying 230 passengers and 12 crew members on board. Of the passengers, 169 are Indian nationals, 53 are British nationals, there are 7 Portuguese nationals, and 1 Canadian national. The injured passengers have been taken by local authorities to the nearest hospitals. We are actively working with the authorities on all emergency response efforts. A special team of caregivers from Air India is on their way to Ahmedabad to provide additional support. The investigations will take time, but anything we can do now, we are doing. We know that many people are concerned for the welfare of their loved ones. We have set up a special helpline that friends and family can reach us at. The number is 1-800-5691-444. That is 1-800-5691-444. We understand that people are eager for information. Please know that we will continue to share accurate and timely information as soon as we can. But anything we report must be accurate and not speculative. We owe that to everyone involved. For now, our teams are working around the clock to support passengers, crew, and their families, as well as investigators, however we can.
That is the CEO of Air India. Now, the type of plane involved in the disaster, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, previously had a stellar safety record. In fact, this was its first fatal crash. But for Boeing as a company, it's a different story. The beleaguered plane maker has been mired in a number of scandals in recent years. Sky's Gurpreet Narwan has the story of its troubled recent history.
Door panels blowing off, missing bolts, fuselage blowouts. A spate of incidents and crashes, some of them catastrophic, that have rocked the aviation industry. And more questions for Boeing, one of the world's largest plane manufacturers, and once the darling of corporate America. The exact cause of the latest crash is still unknown, but it's been a sobering few years for the company. Almost 350 people died in 2 crashes in 2018 and 2019. The company admitted to Congress that pilots weren't given adequate training on new software. Dreamliners were meant to be different, stars of the fleet, and used by almost every major airline. Now they too are under scrutiny.
The issue that Boeing is going to have to deal with urgently is that of confidence around its manufacturing processes. It's been through, over the last few years, a series of inquiries around why its manufacturing has not been up to scratch and not been as fail-safe as it should have been. It's vital that Boeing reassure as quickly as possible because so many of the 787 Dreamliners are flying as we speak around the world.
And Air India, which boasts a robust safety record, now recording its 5th fatal accident in almost 60 years. All of this just as a big reset was underway at Boeing. The company recently agreed to pay $1.1 billion to avoid prosecution in a deal with the Department of Justice that angered the families of victims.
There are real lives at stake here, and when something goes wrong, tragedy affects hundreds of people. It's not just a minor mistake. So it's a really good example of why it is so important for, in our case, to make sure that Boeing is doing the right things and being overseen properly.
Under a new chief executive, sales were up and the share price recovering, but this has stopped that progress in its tracks. Shares were down more than 4% when the market opened. In a statement, Boeing said their deepest condolences went out to the loved ones of the people on board and in Ahmedabad, and that a Boeing team stood ready to support the investigation by Indian authorities. As of yet, We don't know what caused the accident, but the company's reputation is hanging by a thread. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Joining me now is former Hong Kong Airlines pilot Marco Chan. Marco, good to see you. Just picking up on the end of Gurpreet's piece there, how do you feel about Boeing these days?
Yeah, I would say first of all is a series of unfortunate events that got linked to Boeing. Now, it's understandable the passengers may feel uneasy, especially when, headlines involving a well-known aircraft type like a Boeing 787. But it's important to remember that the aircraft actually had an excellent safety record since its introduction until now. As we know, there hadn't been fatal accidents, only minor issues with lithium-ion batteries in its early days. Now, aircraft, they do undergo rigorous testing and certification, and airlines, around the world, they rely on different layers of safety. So not just the aircraft, we're talking about the crew, the maintenance, the air traffic control, the regulation, and so on. So I would say, yes, the 787 remains a very safe aircraft. Now, that said, I understand that the public trust is based on perception, and it's really up to the regulators and the investigators to investigate transparently and respond accordingly. This is how the confidence can be rebuilt later on. But as of now, we can't just drag Boeing in and say that this is their problem. It's too early for that.
Yeah, I absolutely understood. It's fair to say, isn't it, that the passenger planes or building them is effectively a duopoly. It's really only Airbus or Boeing that control that business, not much competition, because I guess it's such an expensive and in some ways risky business to be in.
It is loads of investments coming in. Is really difficult for new entrants into the market, and especially with a lot of countries, their governments and their airlines as well. They've signed certain contracts with certain manufacturer. They've also had their own connections in terms of different structural composites, the engines, for example, different manufacturers of that. So it's really difficult for someone else to come in. But having said that, even Boeing and Airbus, every now and then, they even with their own investment into their new research and development, they could be losing money with their own project as well, let alone other new entrants.
Marco, I've spoken to a lot of former airline pilots today, like you, people keen to share their thoughts and their expertise on this. What will current airline pilots be feeling this evening?
I think absolutely shocked and devastated. Is a horrifying incident to a few, that, especially early morning, seeing that is a Boeing 787 would have shocked a lot of current airline pilots. I think the immediate that what goes through their minds, what they would have done if they were in the cockpit. They would want to look at the footages as well to see any hints of what they can analyze. But of course, we have quite limited information there. But no doubt it would be going through their mind, trying to anticipate what they could have done if they were in the cockpit.
Look, plenty of your colleagues in the passenger plane world have talked about the landing gear still being down, the flaps and everything. I don't want to necessarily revisit that with you right now. But when we do find out the reasons for why this crash happened, which could even take years, are those then the kind of learnings that pilots have to then familiarise themselves with?
No, exactly. Now, the point of the investigation is not to portion blame, is to find the truth for the victim's family, to understand what's going on. But more importantly, is for the entire industry to learn from a lesson if that was the cause of accident and how to improve upon the safety. And it's not just the manufacturer's job, it's the regulators, even investigators learn from it, the pilots, the cabin crew, etc. So we all play a part in the aviation world.
It's a big responsibility, isn't it, flying a passenger plane? I guess some people just take it for granted. They get on, they hear that hello from the captain, they go through the routine of the safety instructions, all that kind of thing. But at times like this, it kind of reminds you that you've got the responsibility for hundreds of lives in your hands every time you take the controls. Does this bring that home?
No, indeed. Every time we put on our uniform, that comes to mind. Every time we have our bags in the airports, we do look relaxed because it's our daily job. But then when stress increases because of these failures or certain scenarios, We are actually well trained for these. Every 6 months, we go into simulator for 2-day check, just to ensure we are up to the standard. So, in fact, for the passengers, you can be rest assured the pilots, including the cabin crew, have a professional team. So you're in good hands.
When you were flying and you heard of accidents happening, what was it like getting back into the plane the next time? And also, what was it like for your passengers? Was the atmosphere different? Did you feel different about getting back into the cockpit?
That's actually a very good question. Getting back in the cockpit myself after hearing accidents, what I tend to do is to ensure I'm even better prepared. I'm saying we always prepare for a flight, but with these scenarios, we want to think a little bit deeper. Also during flight, we also flip about our checklists just to go through what could go wrong in our mind and what we can do to react to it. Passenger-wise, after accidents, they actually do. After a safe landing, they do come into the cockpit to pay a compliment, and they go, that was a safe landing, that was a good landing, thank you for the trip. So every now and then with these accidents and incidents, passengers do appreciate the team a little bit more.
Yeah, look, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Marco, but I do think it's right, isn't it, that the biggest risk in planes tends to be at takeoff or landing, those moments. Is that correct?
Your understanding is perfect. Their takeoff and landing is the most critical phases as well. Imagine taking off with the engine at full power, landing as well, bringing that much energy, that heavy of an aircraft to a complete stop. So it is a critical phase.
Yeah. You do get sometimes these days when the plane has been landed safely and it's taxiing back to the terminal, people breaking into rounds of applause. Did you like hearing that kind of thing?
Actually, a bit of mixed feeling, if you ask myself. So first of all, I always enjoy a compliment. I wouldn't mind passengers clapping for me. However, at times you would think, well, I'm just doing my job, really. So my job is to ensure passengers' safety. So yeah, really, I'm just doing my job. Although it would be nice to hear some clapping, but yeah, it is just our job to ensure passenger safety.
Yeah, appreciate that. Marco, thanks so much for joining us. That's former Hong Kong Airlines pilot Marco Chan speaking to us this evening. Thank you. Well, that's just about all from the UK tonight for the moment. Next, Yalda Hakim will host a special edition of The World with more on today's tragic events in Ahmedabad. But just to remind you of the latest, we're hearing that all but one of the 242 people on board did die in that Air India crash so soon after it took off from Ahmedabad airport earlier on. Not yet clear on how many people on the ground may have died, but speculation is around dozens of people, perhaps as many as 60 to 65. Of course, one of the buildings hit by the aircraft was housing doctors who worked nearby. So early days, but it could be that more than 300 people have died in this. Remarkably, as we've been discussing, one man from Leicester, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, surviving, although his own brother was on the flight and did not survive. We're assuming, given that he is said to be the only survivor. Yalda will be with you next with a special edition of The World with the latest on all today's happenings in Ahmedabad.